everyone, and happy month of May to you all. I know that you know that every month I try to come up with a new theme for my series of talks for the month. And I was just thinking this month, life has felt a little bit heavy, so I wanted to do something that's a little lighter, something that's kind of fun, but still takes us on a journey. And I was looking through the books on my bookshelf, and of course, one of them fell out. And it was Jane Houston's book, The Wizard of Us. Now, I haven't read that book for a number of years, but it just really spoke to me. And I thought, okay, that's going to be it. That's what we're going to talk about this month, The Wizard of Us. And my talk today is We're Off to Be the Wizard, not off to see the wizard. And of course, some of this is based on the story of the Wizard of Oz. Most of us have seen the movie, probably many times, and some of us have read the book. But it's a wonderful story, and I don't think that most of us are aware that it's a truly metaphysical story, as many of the old fairy tales are spiritual stories. And so my series of talks is based upon this work by Jane Houston, but also upon the works of Joseph Campbell and upon a very dear old friend of mine named Jonathan Young. Jonathan Young was actually someone who worked with Joseph Campbell. And when Campbell died, Jonathan was responsible for putting together his archives. And then he traveled to a number of our churches and to church conferences and told wonderful fairy tales late at night. And we would gather around as he told these stories of Cinderella and Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Hansel and Gretel. And with each of them, there was a deep metaphysical meaning, and there were deep spiritual truths. And it was a joyful time. Jonathan spent time here on the West Coast. He lives in Santa Barbara, but he traveled up here and he spoke in a number of churches. And I had the great pleasure of organizing some of those events for him. And I organized something for him with a group of screenwriters at Simon Fraser University. And what was really fascinating was he could sit and go through their scripts and tell them exactly what was wrong with them because of something in the hero's journey that might be missing. And if they didn't know anything about mythology, they wouldn't have known about that. So I'm going to go into that a little bit today, the 7 stages of the hero's journey. But starting with The Wizard of Oz, and of course, if you've seen it, you know it begins with Miss Gulch, that nasty old woman who lived near Dorothy and her Aunt Em and family and the people who worked on the farm. And she came to the farm because Toto, Dorothy's little dog, had bitten her. And she had permission from the sheriff to take the dog and to have Toto destroyed. And Dorothy was just beside herself, and there was nothing that Aunt Em could do about it, or she didn't think that she could. But Toto escaped from Miss Gulch and came running back to Dorothy. And Dorothy decided that what she had to do to save Toto was to run away. And so she did. She ran away, and as she did, along the way, she ran into a fortune teller. And this fortune teller could see that Dorothy, as a young girl, should not be out running away with her little dog and being on her own somewhere. And he told her that Aunt Em was very sick and dying, and that Dorothy had to return to her. And so Dorothy turned around reluctantly to go back to the farm. And when she got there, there was no sign of Aunt Em or of any of the workers on the farm because there was a storm warning and they had all gone to the storm cellar. And the tornado hit. And of course, Dorothy was knocked unconscious. And then we saw the movie move from black and white into living technicolor as the house spun upward, up and up into Munchkinland. And she landed there in Oz. And there was great jubilation because the little munchkins were all dancing around because the house had landed on the Wicked Witch of the East, and it had killed her. And they were so thrilled because she was such an evil, evil person. And they danced around Dorothy. She wasn't quite sure what was going on. And Glinda, the good witch, was there, and then the Wicked Witch of the West appeared as well. And she was the sister of the Wicked Witch of the East. And Glinda gave Dorothy the famous ruby red slippers. In the book, they were actually silver slippers, but on the screen, they were ruby red slippers. And she told Dorothy that these slippers would protect her. And so that's really where the journey began. Uh, Dorothy wouldn't have called it, or she didn't call it, the hero's journey, but there were all those signposts along the way that indicated that that's exactly what it was. So I want to talk about that today. The journey really begins with an inner calling. And I think I talked about this last week, saying that, we all have a calling of some kind. I had a calling to ministry. But we each have a calling to something else, something in our lives, something that inspires us, something that asks us to rise above our conditions and to do something that is bigger than what we ever imagined it could be. And we have the opportunity there to just take life by the horns, the bull by the horns, I guess the expression is, but to just go forward courageously and to do it. And there are always things that happen along the way as we're doing this, and often things that get in the way. And so here's Dorothy, um, in a way, had answered the call, although it's kind of a dreamlike call, where she lands in Oz. She has the freedom. It all began with her singing Over the Rainbow and just this wistful dreaming of freedom, of a different kind of life than what she was living. And all of a sudden, there she is in Oz, in this kind of magical kingdom. And she really wants to go home. And she has no idea how she's going to get there. She has no idea what's ahead, but she has these ruby red slippers. And what happens as we embark upon this journey is that someone shows up to help us along the way. Sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's a group of people. And of course, for Dorothy in the beginning, it was Glinda, the good witch. But also along the way, she met the Scarecrow, and who wanted a brain, and the Tin Man who wanted a heart, and the Lion who wanted courage. That they became her friends, and they were with her along the way. And so, if we look at this from a spiritual perspective in our own lives, as we are seeking a different kind of life, as we're wanting to leave our old ways, it might be leaving a job, it might be leaving a relationship, it could be just leaving home for the first time as a young person. But there may be a calling to some kind of adventure in our lives. And we're not sure where that's going to take us. And if we take those first steps forward, we may land somewhere where we don't recognize much of what's around us, and we're not sure where we're going to go next. But inevitably, someone shows up who's going to help us. It's a mentor of some kind. Now, if we're on a spiritual path and that's the journey that we're taking, it's going to be the teacher, the spiritual mentor who's going to take us there. If it's some kind of job, there's going to be someone who's going to show up, who's going to give us advice. There's going to be that person that we feel that we can lean on. There's that person who's going to give us trust, give us some kind of faith that we can go forward. And that's a really, really important part of our journey as we're stepping forward. Not knowing what's ahead, not knowing about the unknown, but we have our ruby red slippers. And to me, those ruby red slippers represent faith. Now, it's faith that we are going to be okay. It's faith that there is a higher power somewhere and that we're going to be taken care of. But the interesting thing to me about the ruby red slippers, and I know that this isn't discussed in The Wizard of Oz, but the interesting thing is with slippers or with shoes, we can take them on or off. And isn't that just a little bit like our spiritual nature? We can kind of step aside from our spirituality whenever we feel the need to. Sometimes if life is going really well, we just forget about it. We step aside. We just think everything is going our way, everything is fine, we don't really need any help along the way. And we forget. We forget about this power in our lives. We forget about the communication with it that is so important. We can step aside from it. We can take off those slippers. We can kind of unzip from that spiritual being that we have just begun to connect with. And and so we're going merrily along our way. And then something happens where fear will call us back. We'll be going so far, and it gets kind of scary. And of course, the way that our life was before is familiar to us. And it's very easy to step back into the familiar, even if we didn't like where we were, even if we didn't like what it was like. It's easy to fall back into that place again. And so sometimes we do kind of slip back. The path ahead just seems way too uncertain. And there's always someone there to tell us that we really don't know what we're doing, we don't know where we're going, and that we'd better mind what we're doing and perhaps stay where we are, where that job is familiar, or that relationship is one that we at least know about. This house that we're living in, or this town that we're living in, is something that we can count on. We know all the people there. What will happen if we step out too far away from it? And so sometimes that fear just takes us back to that place. But inevitably there is still that inner longing. And if we're feeling that inner longing and we ignore it, then our lives are not going to be happy. We're not going to be the joyful, free people that we really want to be. We're ignoring that. We're on this hero's journey, and we've stopped being heroic. We've given up our hopes. We've given up our dreams. We just don't know where we're going to go next, or exactly what we're going to do next. And this thing that has pulled us back is making us uncomfortable in a place where we were once comfortable. Now, we can either be in a place where our faith begins to grow again, or we can be in a place where we just go into a kind of, a place of a gray area in our lives, a place where everything is just always the same. And we kind of think, well, that's just our lot. That's where we have to be. And we don't know. We just don't know what we might do about it. And then as this starts to grow in us, and if we refuse to let this gray area take over our lives, again, our faith begins to grow. We start to have a vision of what our life might really be like, of the life that we really want to have as we go forward. And we start to feel that spiritual connection kind of burbling up inside us again. There is something there that is letting us know that it's okay to go forward, that it's okay to give up these old ways that we've fallen back into. And we might fall back into them time and time again. But we don't have to stay there. And that's the thing that we really have to remember. We don't have to stay there, because we have this inner guidance system. I call it God positioning system. That's my GPS, the God positioning system, which always lets us know exactly where we are and points us in the direction that we want to go. And we don't necessarily know what it's going to look like. But the thing is that as opportunities come our way, we say yes. In the same way that Dorothy said yes as she picked up the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the Lion along the way, as they went off to see the wizard, off to find the wizard. Dorothy wanted to go home. That was her dream. That was her passion. And Glinda told her that the wizard was the person who could help her along the way. And so we're looking for our own wizard. We're looking for our own wisdom. We're longing for that something that is going to take us to a higher consciousness, to a higher place. And we don't know what it's going to look like, but all of a sudden we really know that we can never go back to where we were. Not ever again. And so we're kind of swallowed up by the unknown. And sometimes that can feel like we're in chaos. But when we're in chaos, one of the things that we can know for certain is that out of chaos comes order. And we need to have faith in that as we're going along. If we're feeling that we're in that place of not knowing, if we're in a place where things around us are chaotic, where things are kind of swirling around, if we're kind of in that tornado actually, that there is a place of stillness. And in that stillness, we can find wisdom and we can find truth. And this is often a time where we sink into the dark night of the soul because everything is so unfamiliar. We know we can't go back. We're not sure where we're going forward. And so it's a time when we can go into depression, into frustration, into a place of just feeling so disconnected from everything. We're sitting in a dark, dark place and we can't see the light. And yet we're looking for the light. We're looking for the way forward. And that's the time when we often are tested. We don't like to be tested, but it's often the time when we are tested. It's about how much courage do we have? How much heart do we have? Are we using our brains to the full capacity? How much faith do we have? Do we know? Do we absolutely know that there is a higher power in our lives? And do we start to see what that is? The Bible calls this time the pearl of great price. It's the grain of sand that's inside the oyster, where it is constantly irritated until it becomes that beautiful pearl. When we're in that dark night of the soul, when we're going through these tests, that's what's happening. That it's being refined. We're being refined. We're growing into that beautiful pearl. And if we can only remember that this is not a place where we're stopping. We're not stalling here. We're not building a condominium here. We're not pitching a tent. We're moving on through it. And then in that dark place, what happens is we start to see the light, but the light is not somewhere out there. It's not somewhere out beyond us. The light is within us. And that's when we come to know the truth about this teaching. We come to know and to really understand that the God of our being, not some being out there in a cloud that is an old man with a long white beard who's sitting and judging us, but this intelligence, this energy, this power, this amazing beingness that each of us is indwelling inside us. And when we're in that darkest place and we start to see the light, we're feeling that presence within. We often wait until we're in the midst of trouble before we start to pray, before we start to ask God for help. But as we do, and as we commune with the divine, we start to feel that unconditional love within us, that is the love that is given to us by this awesome power. And as we do, the light keeps growing. And as it grows, it fills our bodies. And then it shines outward and it reveals the path ahead to us. And suddenly we know exactly where we're going. We find the Holy Grail. It's not some cup from which we drink from. Instead, it is this beautiful spiritual place that is within each and every one of us. Dorothy was looking for the wizard. If we look at the wizard as being the Godhead, being the divine, she got to the place where the wizard was dwelling. The wizard was speaking, and it was quite a frightening thing. And then Toto, her little dog, which represents metaphysically a messenger, Toto pulled away a curtain, and there was this man, this fake God, you might say, who is speaking from behind. And Dorothy is crestfallen. She doesn't know what to do. And then suddenly she just feels this power. And she knows she wants to go home. And the thing is, we think when we see the picture and when we see the movie that home is Kansas. where her house is, her home, where Aunt Em lives, where the farmhands live. But that's not it at all. We're on our journey home to God. That's what this path is all about. We are seekers on the path. And as we are seeking, and we begin to understand what we're seeking, and we begin to be mentored and to understand it, we become pilgrims on the path. And when we become pilgrims on the path, there is no turning back. It doesn't matter what we're going through, because we have the brains, we have the heart, we have the courage to carry on. And as we carry on, this power within us grows and overtakes our lives. And we begin to truly understand that this is what Ernest Holmes calls the power for good in the universe that we can use. We can use this in our lives, and as we use it in our lives, and as we change our thinking and agree to only be positive in our thinking, then we start to create more positive lives. And we move way beyond those places of darkness. We move way beyond the mundane lives that we might have once settled for. We refuse to settle because we know that all of the glory and all of the good is right around us right now, right here, right now, and that we can go forward and manifest our greatest dreams. It's that simple and it's that complicated, but it's all about faith. It's all about knowing that that wizard is not somewhere out there. That wizard is inside us. And so in the next few weeks, I'm going to be talking about the scarecrow and the tin man and the lion and how we relate to those things in our lives. And I really look forward to sharing those things with you. So thank you for being with me today on this journey as we're off to be the wizard. And I look forward to our time together next Sunday and in the Sundays ahead. Bless you all and have a wonderful week. And so it is. And I invite you now, if you're on our webpage, to go to the donate button and to make your donation to us today at our Center for Spiritual Living Victoria. Because it's during these times, as you continue to make your contributions, that you're keeping our center thriving, so that it's going to be there waiting for you when we open our doors again at the end of this pandemic. And God knows that's going to be sooner rather than later. And also, if you're watching this on Facebook, you can go to our webpage at cslvictoria.org, and you'll see the donate button there on the homepage. Or alternatively, you can send a contribution to our mailing address, and you'll find that on our webpage as well. It's the Harriet Road address. You can send a check there, or you can send an e-transfer to Rev Carrie. That's REVCARRIE at cslvictoria.org, and that will get deposited into our center's bank account, and you will receive a tax receipt for that at the end of this year. Bless you for all that you do. Bless you for giving to us. Bless you for being part of our center and for being online with us during these times. It's wonderful to see you. Join us for our meditation with Reverend Joanna on Thursday nights. If you receive our newsletter, you'll see all of the other things that are going on as well. And we invite you to join in. And, it's a great time to spend some time going within and just to reconnect with spirit, reconnect with the truth of who we are, that we're spirit having a human experience, and let's not forget it. God bless you on this journey. Thank you for being with me today, and so it is.